Now to our top stories. The worldwide jihadi movement is alive and strong. Recent attacks in Turkey, as well as over 1,000 cars torched by migrants in France, a mob of migrants attacking police and setting one of Germany's oldest churches ablaze. Joining us is the World Report senior analyst, Morris Beschloss, whom you can follow at mbeschloss on Twitter. More the scourge of terrorism around the world is spreading, is continuing. Western Europe is losing by the day. We're having attacks in Bavaria, attacks in Germany, France, Turkey, all over the world. What do you say about the recent attacks in Turkey? Turkey's a little bit different situation than Syria, Iraq, Iran.
Turkey is really a civilized country. It has a basic economy that would qualify it for Western Europe or the European community. As a matter of fact, Turkey has been negotiating to become a member of the European community, but there has been a lot of antagonism toward the Muslim influence.
Mainly from the top down.
From the top down. Now what has happened is that the ISIS scourge, which is now spreading all over, not only Europe, it's now coming to the United States in small quantities right now, but with a chance of spreading any time now. There's nothing to stop it, because it's like Nazism, and communism. It's an ism that affects young people, and they feel that if they can be part of this movement, they'll change the world.
And don't you feel that when you look at the West, most of the European nations, the United States, there seems to be this lack of morality, this lack of character, this lack of responsibility.
And
values. And I think that that's something that ISIS and the Islamic radicalization brings to these kids. It gives them some structure. It gives them a reason. It gives them motivation.
They had no insulation against it. I mean, they, especially the so-called millennials, they're open to any extreme ism that's running wild. I kind of compare the ISIS scourge to cancer. Now, if you have a cancer of the pancreas, or you have the cancer of the prostate, or you can do something. You can localize it, and in many cases you can cure it. But when the cancer spreads all over the body, there's nothing you can do. I mean, it's uncontrollable. And I think ISIS has become that kind of a scourge. It's uncontrollable.
We also have, what we talked about in the beginning was France. There's over 1,000 cars that were torched, and France says they have no idea who it was or what the motivation is. I mean, we all have a good idea what the motivation is, and to deny that is basically committing self-suicide.
Well, that's exactly what's happened. You know, if you look at it in the historical perspective, I always go back to the assassination of the Archduke Francis Ferdinand, who was going to be the successor of Franz Joseph, the emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which was one of the powerful empires of the late 19th century and also until 1914. It's almost unbelievable when you think the world was ruled by the British Empire, the French Empire, the German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They were the ones that controlled the whole world, and all these other countries were looked at as pygmies, some to be dominated and used. And then you had the First War, which crushed both France and Germany as far as manpower and ability to be strong world leaders. And then, of course, you had the Second World War, which was even more fratricidal than the First War. And then there was some hope that maybe somehow even the two superpowers, you had the United States and the Soviet Union, but it was only if those two countries somehow could work out a deal, then the world would be at peace. Well, everybody was kidding themselves. That now you have the United States as not even as a superpower anymore, because we've gone downhill the last 8 years with our military, with our economy, with our the respect that we have from other countries. So consequently, we're in a position right now where the world is totally out of control, and the young people are looking for some direction. And a lot of the young people, especially in the Muslim countries, which hate every other religion. You know, this is basic to Islam. If you are a Muslim, you hate the Jews for sure, but now they're openly coming out against Christianity. This is what happened in Istanbul in Turkey. That club was mostly occupied by Christians.
But even inside of Islam itself, I mean, factions against the Shia hate the Sunni, and the Sunni hate the Shia,
right.
And they all hate the Kurds.
But at the time when the white Western Christian world was in power, they looked at it like a bunch of children, you know, playing war against each other. But now that Europe is crumbling, I'm saying this today, that Europe is crumbling, that the European community was a sham to begin with, and it's only going to get worse. I think Brexit, the British getting out of the Eurocom was probably a good move, and the Prime Minister of England today, May is her last name, is pretty good. She has an understanding, and she's trying to cope with the fact that England is not what they used to be.
And I think you're going to continue to see more right-of-center leaders stepping up all over Europe. Le Pen in France. I think you're going to see Merkel get trounced.
Oh, Angela Merkel.
She'll be replaced.
She's finished. I mean, she grew up in Eastern Germany, which was communistic at the time when they had the satellites in the Soviet Union. And by the way, I agree with Vladimir Putin. The worst mistake ever made by Russia
was the breakup of the Soviet Union.
So it made no sense. And Gorbachev was a guy that was, you know, it all came out of Star Wars. They thought that the United States had a shield that they could put over the country, and they could actually send atomic bombs against the Russians, but the Russians couldn't do it back because the United States, they literally thought they had this protection. So,
but their economy was really in shambles at that point as well. I mean, they were critically hurting economically at the same time.
Well, you bring up an interesting point. There was never any real economy in Russia, and the Muslim countries like Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan, and they really didn't contribute anything other than, you know, allowing themselves to work the farmland and so on. But what Gorbachev did, he cut away the Balkans, which were communized, and the Baltics, which were communized. So a lot of the Western-type nations were given their freedom, and Russia lost the input they were getting from those particular countries. So all you had left was Russia, and they had two things going for them. They had oil, natural gas, and pipelines, which had been developed over a period of 60 years, and that gave them a fair amount of income. And they also...
And control.
But they also, one thing that a lot of people and even experts don't realize, Russia has always had a very strong military capability. And one thing I will give Joseph Stalin credit for, the reason that the Russians were able to turn around the war against Germany had nothing to do with England or the United States. It had to do with a huge military establishment that was behind the Ural Mountains, where in the last year of the war, 1944, the Russians built more Stormoviks and MiGs than we built our planes. They built about 120,000 planes. And they had developed this huge military empire, which gave them the power to roll back the Nazis and smash the German army in the East. But other than that, as far as having a modern 20th century kind of economy, they never had. Probably never will, because there's nothing happening to develop it.
So what can President Trump do to stop ISIS? Cut off the funding, bomb the oil fields? What can he actually do to control this?
I think what will happen with Trump, I don't think he's going to try to do something with ISIS. He's going to try to do something with the countries that are harboring ISIS primarily. And right now, ISIS is basically in Iraq,
Syria.
And Syria. Those are the two countries. And of course, Lebanon is nothing but a vestige of the Syrian rebellion. The whole Middle East is other than Israel is the only civilized nation there. The Saudi Arabs, all they ever had was oil. And every president, starting with Franklin Roosevelt, cozied up to them to be nice and not offend them, so they would continue to produce the oil was needed by the rest of the world.
So we're going to continue to see ISIS for the short term, maybe even the long term. Is that your prediction?
Yes, because it's not an army. You can't. If it was a field army,
they don't wear uniforms.
It's not only that. They insinuate themselves. I said it's like a cancer that's all over the body.
Population.
Yep.